Welcome friends, James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, August 3rd, 2015, and I often talk about the virtues of the alternative media, or at least the potential of the alternative media, so I think it's part of my duty to highlight those people who are doing a great job in the alternative media. And on that note, we're going to turn to today's guest, Andrew Demeter, who I trust, I'm sure that some of you will know by his YouTube handle of Teen Take, because at that channel on YouTube, which I will of course link to in the show notes, he is doing yeoman's work in the alt media, doing really well-produced, short, incisive, informative videos and interviews on a range of different subjects. I've really been enjoying his work lately, so I'd like to direct it to your attention. Andrew Demeter, thank you so much for coming on the Corbett Report.
Thank you for having me, James. It's a real honor to be on the program. I admire you, and have it be quoted, you, I think, in my opinion, are one of the most articulate people on YouTube, and I'm not just saying that. I really admire your work, so thanks for having me on.
Well, I very much appreciate that, and I, more to the point, appreciate the work that you're doing. So let's get into this. Obviously, your handle is Teen Take. You are obviously a teenager. How old are you? When did you start getting involved in this alt media production, and why?
I am 17. I'm kind of upset because I can no longer count that on my fingers, but I officially launched my YouTube channel in December of 2012. It was during finals week at school, and it was actually right after the whole Newtown shooting in Connecticut. Back then, I think I was sort of more on the skeptical, I don't want to say conspiratorial side of things, but now I've just sort of shifted more to current events and interviews. But to answer your question of how specifically I got started, I previously had a YouTube channel about technology, video game reviews, stuff like that, which looking back is just kind of pointless. Not to say that there's not a place for it, but I just sort of was really interested in aspects of storytelling and video production, editing especially, and that's where I just uploaded content, and I really loved that idea of getting feedback from people all over the world, and it was just so empowering to me. And then secondly, the reason I started YouTube was to serve as a time capsule of sorts, because I loved just in the past looking back and rewatching old family movies on mini DV tapes and stuff like that, and I just found it so entertaining. So I wanted to catalog sort of my opinions and beliefs at this stage in my life to further down the road look back and reflect on.
You know, that's an interesting point, and one that I don't really reflect on in my own work, but you certainly can go back through my early podcasts to today and look at the development that I've gone through in terms of just the knowledge and wisdom and experience and all of that. So it really is actually interesting from that perspective, although I don't often think about it. So you had some sort of channel before this point, so you weren't exactly new to video production when you started this, then?
Correct. Like I said, I think it was in like 6th grade, I'd say I really got involved in video production. And that's, like you said in the intro, why my content tends to be more high quality. And no, it's not only because I spend a ridiculous amount of money per video on stock footage and other visual elements that make it more aesthetic, but like I said, I just loved the elements of storytelling in video production, and at school now even, I am sort of the go-to guy along with one of my good friends for when, for example, a club needs a promotional video to be made, or even the school administration. So it's just really enjoyable to me in that respect as well.
Well, that absolutely shows through in your work, and obviously your videos are slicker and better produced than mine, so my hat's off to you for the work that you do and put into that, and the time and effort and money and all of the stuff that goes into it. Trust me, I know that in order to produce something well, it really does take a lot of work. Well, let's talk about your sort of positioning here. Obviously, your handle is Teen Take. A lot of people will know you from that perspective. The fact that you are a teenager who's doing this is something of a novelty, because unfortunately there aren't a lot of people of your age who are quite so active in getting out there producing media in this realm. Obviously, talking about video games or that kind of thing, much more common. Do you think this is an advantage or a disadvantage when it comes to getting people to take your work seriously?
I think it's both, put simply, because, for example, a lot of times, as far as a disadvantage, when I reach out to people like celebrities sometimes, and even just other people in the alternative media scene, they tend to, like you implied, not take me seriously because they just think I'm a teenager, which anymore now at the bottom of my emails that I write when I sign my name, I also hyperlink my name's text to my Wikipedia page in hopes that that will somehow give me some fantastical credibility to them and actually have them consider me. But so in that respect, I'm not taken seriously a lot, and that's sort of a disadvantage. But in other ways, it really is an advantage because my most popular video on YouTube, me confronting former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, the only reason why I had that opportunity was not because I was an adult, but because C-SPAN hosted a documentary competition specifically targeted for teenagers and high school students. So without being just by virtue of my age, I wouldn't have had that opportunity as well as a host of others. And then again, you sort of have mixed responses. Last, or a couple months before school let out, actually, I went to a speech that President Obama was giving in Cleveland, and I somehow miraculously, again, being in alternative media, managed to get in as a member of the press in the White House press corps. I was at least credentialed by the White House. So you know, sometimes you get those mixed responses where you're like, I don't know why they did this, but it managed to work. So I'd say overall age would be an advantage, and it's just getting exposed to all this information at a young age helps you further down the line, I suppose. And also, to your point about me being a quote-unquote novelty, I am really happy to see some other teenagers taking up this task. And by no means am I saying I'm the first person to ever do political commentary as a teenager, but people like C.J. Pearson, he's a 12-year-old from Georgia. People like Rachel Parent, she's 15 or 16, I believe, in Toronto, Canada. And Daniel Bissonnette, he's another GMO activist like Rachel in Canada. So, and he's like 9 years old, I think, giving speeches that I could not even dream of giving. So it's really inspiring. And through the power of the internet, this has made it all possible. The advent of the internet, decentralizing this information, has made it possible for everyone of all ages to get involved and fight the good fight.
That's absolutely right. It's something I talk about a lot, and it's good to see it. I mean, really see it happening with people like yourself and the others that you mention. And this is an interesting, again, it's an interesting phenomenon because it's not so widespread at this point to have someone who's dedicated to sort of political commentary, news, and information at such a relatively young age. What kind of feedback have you had from family and friends and your school and places like that about the work that you're doing?
I'd say overwhelmingly, at least among my peers, the response is sort of apathetic, as you would expect with teenagers. But since I am, like, at least since most of my peers know me, at least I would hope so, they, for example, I post my videos on Instagram or links to them on YouTube, and people who might be friends with me or at least know me, they just click on the video and say, hey, I know that kid somehow. And just by that connection, at least they're getting exposed to the information. What they do with it is kind of almost irrelevant. Not that it's not important, but at least they're getting exposed to it. And for example, when I won that documentary competition with C-SPAN that I was mentioning earlier that led me to talk to or confront Pelosi, when I won that, C-SPAN actually came to my school and did this whole presentation that was kind of an embarrassment to me because I tend to be introverted and shy, but nonetheless, they played that video in front of my whole sophomore class at the time. So it's just so important to, whether or not people actually agree with you or not, just at least get them exposed to this different information that they're not hearing in school, that they're not hearing on mainstream TV. And I think that's ultimately the most important aspect of my work.
I absolutely agree with you. And so for people out there who are taking a look at your story and are inspired by it, either they're young themselves and want to get involved in this, or maybe they've just never thought of doing this type of media before, what would you say to people to encourage them to get involved and to stop being the audience and start being a participant in this conversation?
Above all else, I would say persistence is key. I cannot tell you how many times persistence has paid off. And it sounds corny just to say that, but it's so true. For example, going back to when I managed to miraculously get into the Obama event where he was giving a speech in Cleveland, I tried to, when I initially saw the announcement, it was on Twitter, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance to ask President Obama a question about drone strikes, and all these ridiculous thoughts went through my head that I wanted to pursue. And to get into the event, there was only about like 200 seats available, 200 tickets. You had to call at a time when I was in school and I couldn't call, and reserve tickets, and then you had to pick them up the same day and you couldn't have someone else pick it up. So it was this long, ridiculous process that, long story short, I couldn't manage to work out. So instead of just, moping around and saying, oh, well, whatever, it won't work. Instead of doing that and taking no for an answer, I said, let me think about this. How else can I manage to get into the event? And so what did I do? Well, I emailed the CEO of the City Club, which was the organization hosting the event, and I said, hey, I'm an independent journalist. I was wondering if there's any way for me to get credentialed to get into this event as press to cover it. And surprisingly, he responded. And then, like I said, the White House credentialed me, something I thought would have never happened in my wildest dreams. But because I didn't take no for an answer, I managed to actually work that out again. And of course, I didn't actually get to ask President Obama a question because there was a very strict divide between press and everyone who could ask questions. But that aside, another aspect of being successful, getting involved, is networking. James, you and me talking right now is an important aspect of networking. I am able to speak to your audience directly, which is an incredible opportunity. But all these incredible networking opportunities that I've come across, for example, a lady, or rather the owner of this restaurant in Cleveland, it's a non-GMO restaurant, actually, one of like 3 in the country. And when I was there, I met with, or I arranged the interview through the owner's publicist. And then that publicist actually this week is getting me into 2 separate events where I will meet Robin O'Brien, who's an author and GMO activist, or anti-GMO activist, as well as Senator Marco Rubio, and lastly, Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio. So just by interviewing someone, I managed to get into all these other connections, and I just really can't stress that enough. Networking in addition to persistence.
Absolutely. I can relate to that, because one of the greatest things for me when I started doing this was, hey, now I have an excuse to actually email these people that I'm listening to or reading and have a conversation with them. And it really is an amazing part of an aspect of all of this. All right. Well, there's a lot more that can be said, but perhaps we should just leave people to start exploring your work for themselves. Once again, I wouldn't be highlighting it if it wasn't interesting and valuable for me in the research that I do. For example, I will direct people specifically to a recent video you posted on anti-NSA activists spying on NYC residents, talking about wearealwayslistening.com taking some extra legal means to spy on people and make it available on the internet to show people this is what the NSA is doing. Why are you comfortable with the NSA doing it but uncomfortable with us doing it? I think that was an interesting idea, and you were the first person I heard talking about it. That's how I found out about that. So it's a valuable channel as a resource for me. We'll of course also link to the Nancy Pelosi confrontation that you are probably best known for at this point. Any other videos that you've done that you think you'd like to highlight for the audience?
I would say check out my video. It's called Teen Stopped by Secret Service for Asking Obama a Question, or something like that. That's the video where I was at the speech Obama was giving, and I guess the title admittedly is a bit sensationalistic because Secret Service didn't technically stop me, but it's an interesting video, so check that out, all these runarounds I had to go through. And other than that, look out next weekend, next Saturday. I post every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll have an interview up with Dr. Vandana Shiva. She's an Indian activist based in New Delhi, and she's all about seed saving, and she's a GMO activist and author, world-renowned speaker, so that'll be up next Saturday. You can also look out for that.
I am turning a bit green with envy at the moment. I have been attempting to interview her for years and never been able to connect with her. So there you go. Persistence pays off. I should have persisted a little bit more in that. Well, I'm very much looking forward to that interview. I think I'm sure it will be an interesting one. And once again, Andrew Demeter, aka Teen Take. The only question I have left for you is, what are you going to do in 3 years' time? Are you going to become 20-something Take?
That is a great question. It's one, probably the most frequent question I'm asked. What happens after you turn 19 and you're no longer a teen? What's going to happen? And to that I say, I don't know, time will tell, but I'm not concerned about the brand so much as I am the message. So that's important. And in closing, James, I'd like to just thank you again for having me on. And in your words, to paraphrase them sort of, we need to become the media and not just repeat what has already been done and follow the news cycle. We need to create our own.
Well, I agree with that, and actually I think that traces back to Jello Biafra, but I will take credit for it anyway. All right, Andrew Demeter, thank you so much for being on today, and I hope people check out Teen Take. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
The Corbett Report is brought to you by the Corbett Report subscriber, a weekly newsletter featuring James Corbett's International Forecaster editorial, recommended reading and viewing, discounts on Corbett Report DVDs, and once a month, a subscriber-only video. Sign up today to start receiving your copy at corbettreport.com/support.